She walked quietly through the dimly lit hospital corridor, the soft squeak of her white sneakers the only sound accompanying her. Her shift had stretched beyond its usual hours, 12 long hours of caring for others, of comforting patients, checking vitals, responding to emergencies, and offering kind smiles even when her feet ached and her eyes burned with exhaustion. Her name was Emily, a 26-year-old nurse who had only recently begun her journey in the medical field. Despite the stress, despite the long hours, she loved what she did. Nursing wasn't just a job to her, it was her calling. That night had been unusually hectic. The emergency room overflowed with patients, and the staff was stretched thin. Emily hadn't even had a moment to sit down. It wasn't until nearly 3:30 a.m. that the ward calmed, and she could finally take a breath. As she passed through the waiting area near the entrance, something caught her eye: a man slumped in an uncomfortable plastic chair, sleeping soundly, his head tilted back against the wall. He wasn't a patient, that much was clear. His clothes were slightly wrinkled but expensive looking, and there was a laptop bag next to his feet. His coat had slipped off his shoulders, and despite the warmth inside the hospital, his arms were wrapped tightly across his chest, like someone used to fending off cold nights. She slowed down, curious. She had never seen him before. He must have come in with someone, perhaps a family member who had been admitted. Maybe he had no one else and didn't want to leave them alone. She knew that feeling. Many people spent sleepless nights here, worrying over loved ones, waiting for news, sometimes clinging to hope by the thinnest of threads. Emily hesitated for a moment before reaching for the light fleece jacket she had been wearing earlier. She had taken it off when the ward heated up, and it now hung loosely around her waist. Without a word, she walked over to the man, gently draping it over his shoulders. She was careful not to wake him. It was a small gesture, simple, really, but one that came straight from the heart. She didn't expect him to notice. She didn't expect anything at all. The next morning, Emily had already returned to her shift by the time the man woke up. Blinking groggily, he looked around, confused for a moment. Then he noticed the jacket around his shoulders. It didn't belong to him. He stood, looking for someone to thank, but no one nearby recognized the jacket or had seen who left it. He folded it neatly and left it at the front desk with a note. That man was Daniel Carrington, a name that would have meant nothing to Emily, but it was one that carried significant weight in the business world. Daniel was a billionaire tech CEO, the founder of one of the most influential technology firms in the country. Known for his vision and innovation, he was also infamous for being a workaholic. Very few people knew of his private life, his loneliness, or the pain he carried from losing his wife to cancer just a year ago. He had rushed into the hospital that night after receiving a call from his younger sister, who had been in a serious car accident. He spent the night worrying, overwhelmed with emotion, helpless as doctors worked to stabilize her. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, and the world he was used to controlling slipped away from him. And then, a jacket. A small act of kindness, given without expectation. In a world full of people who wanted things from him, someone had quietly given him comfort and warmth. He asked about the nurse who had given him the jacket. It took some time, but with a bit of persuasion and a generous donation to the hospital's charity wing, he found out her name, Emily. A few days later, she received a letter in her locker. Handwritten, on fine stationery, with no signature. You reminded me what kindness looks like when I'd forgotten it still existed. Thank you. Emily smiled at the letter but didn't think much more of it. She was used to gratitude taking many forms, from handwritten notes to tearful hugs from patients' families. It was part of her world, and she never expected more than that. But Daniel wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, he came back. Sometimes he volunteered anonymously in the pediatric unit, reading stories to the children. Other times he would sit quietly in the waiting room, observing the quiet strength of the nurses, doctors, and staff. He was trying to understand, to reconnect with a world he'd drifted far away from in his pursuit of success. Eventually, their paths crossed again. It happened when Emily was called to assist in the ICU, where Daniel's sister was recovering. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of recognition, a shared understanding of silent pain and quiet compassion. You're the man I gave the jacket to, she said simply. He smiled. And you're the nurse who reminded me to feel again. They began to talk. At first, only during breaks. Simple conversations about life, medicine, family, loss. Daniel never introduced himself as a CEO. To Emily, he was just Daniel, the man who listened when she spoke, who brought coffee on long nights, who asked about her dreams. And she had many. Emily wanted to start a program for underprivileged students who wanted to become nurses but didn't have the financial means. She wanted to help expand mental health support in hospitals. She dreamed of making an impact beyond the bedside. One afternoon, weeks later, she received a letter, this time, signed. It was from Daniel Carrington. Inside was a proposal, a foundation, to be co-founded by both of them. Funded entirely by Daniel, with Emily as the director. Its mission: to support nurses, improve patient care, and fund education for aspiring healthcare workers from underserved communities. She was stunned. It was everything she had dreamed of, handed to her not as a gift, but as an opportunity she had earned. "I didn't choose you because you gave me a jacket," he wrote. "I chose you because you gave from your heart without asking for anything in return. The world needs more of that. And I believe you can help build it." The foundation launched within 6 months. Emily's name was on the building, alongside Daniel's. She remained a nurse at heart, always visiting wards, listening to staff, never forgetting where she came from. But now, her reach extended far beyond the hospital walls. Scholarships, mobile clinics, mental health programs, all built on a foundation of compassion, empathy, and one quiet night when she noticed a man sleeping in a chair and chose to care. Their relationship deepened, not just professionally, but emotionally. Two people broken in different ways found healing through kindness. Daniel found purpose. Emily found a platform. Together, they reminded the world that the smallest acts often spark the biggest changes. In time, their story became known. Not because they sought fame, but because it inspired others. Nurses started sharing their own stories. Patients began seeing healthcare workers not just as providers, but as people, full of love, sacrifice, and strength. All because one young nurse chose to give her jacket to a stranger in need. And that stranger, he changed her life, but only because she had already changed his. This story is a reminder that real wealth lies not in money, but in the ability to touch lives with kindness. In a world rushing forward, sometimes it's the quiet moments, the soft gestures, that leave the deepest impact. Whether you're a nurse, a stranger, or a CEO, the chance to change a life might come when you least expect it. And sometimes, it starts with something as simple as a jacket.